I'm in an Orthodox
Bible.
Bible. Orthodox means original. My grandfather was a priest for 40 years. My grandmother a righteous woman before God. It's because of them I know God. So I love to study this Holy Orthodox Bible. We in the first books of the Maccabees going into that history times. The last days of King Antiochus. The last days of King Antiochus IV. Chapter 6 verse 1. Now King Antiochus passed through the upper countries and heard that Elamias in Persia was a splendid city for its wealth in silver and gold. Its temple contained great wealth, with shields of gold, and breastplates and weaponry left there by Alexander the Great, the son of Philip, the Macedonian king who first ruled over the Greeks. So he came and he sought to defeat the city and take spoils. But he failed because his plot was uncovered by the men of the city, and they confronted and fought against him, and he fled and retreated from there, very discouraged, and went back to Babylon. And then a man came and told him while he was still in Persia, and that his army which he had invaded the land of Judah was put to the fight, and that Lysias had gone first with a strong army, but had been put to shame before Israel, that Israel was growing strong by the weapons, supplies, and abundant spoils they had taken from the armies, and they had conquered. Moreover, they had pulled down the abominations he built on top of the altar in Jerusalem. They had encircled the sanctuary with high walls as it had before, as well as Beth-Azar, his hometown. When the king received this report, he was shocked and greatly shaken. He fell upon his bed and was sick with grief, because matters had not gone for him as he hoped. The king laid there several days, for deepening in grief worsened his conditions. He concluded he was about to die. Thus he called together his friends, saying, "Sleep has eluded my eyes, anxiety has devastated my heart. I ask myself, what is this stress I have come to, and into what sea of troubles am I immersed? For I was kind and loved as a ruler, but now I recall the evils I did in Jerusalem. For I took all the silver and gold vessels and sent to destroy those who lived in Judah for no good reason. I know that because of these things evils have found me. And behold, I am perishing with deep grief in a foreign land." Secession of Antiochus V. Chapter 6 verse 14. He then summoned Philip, one of his friends, and set him over his entire kingdom. He gave him his crown and his robe and ring, and that he could take charge of his son Antiochus and raise him to rule. Thus Antiochus the king died in the 149th year. When Lysias found out the king had reposed, and he established Antiochus his son to reign, and Lysias had raised him from youth and called him Epator. Siege of the Citadel. Chapter 6 verse 18. Now men from the citadel were confining Israel to an area around the sanctuary, and they were attempting by whatever means to injure them and to bring strength to the Gentiles. So he gathered all the men and defeated them, and they assembled the army and attacked the city in the 115th year. He also built engines of war and other instruments of battle. But some of these armies encamped, and they escaped from the enclosure. Some ungodly Israelites sided with them too, and they approached the king, saying, "How long will it be until you render a judgment to avenge our brothers? We were pleased to serve your father and to follow what he said and obey his orders. Because of this, the sons of our people attacked the citadels and became our enemies. Besides this, they killed as many of us as they found, and our inheritance was taken away. But they have not stretched out their hand against us alone, but also against all the lands of their borders. And behold, today they have surrounded the citadel in Jerusalem to defeat it. They have strengthened the sanctuary and Beth-Azar as well. So unless you quickly overtake them, they will do worse things than these, and you will be unable to stop them. Campaign of Antiochus V and Lysis. Chapter 6, verse 28. The king was angered greatly when he heard this, so he assembled all his friends, the military leaders, and those who ruled. Armies of mercenaries came to him as well from all other nations, from various islands of seas. So the numbers of his armies was 100,000 foot soldiers, 20,000 cavalries, 32 elephants trained for battle. And they arrived through Idumea and marched against Beth-zur, fighting for many days and building engines of war. But Israel went out, set them on fire in battle heroically. And Judas then marched out from the citadels and set up camp in Beth-Zachariah, across from the king's camp. The next morning the king rose at dawn and led his army on the forced march on the highway to Beth-Zachariah. His soldiers prepared themselves for warfare and blew the trumpets. They also showed the elephants the juice of grapes and mulberries to ready them for the campaign. And then they stationed the elephants among the sacks and set along each animal's 1,000 men covered with coats of mail and with bronze helmets in their heads. 500 horsemen were chosen, assigned to each elephant. These positioned themselves beforehand. Wherever the animals was, wherever it went, and the rod alongside never left it alone. Sturdy, covered wooden towers were strapped upon each elephant by a special harness, and 4 armed men fought from inside each tower with its Indian driver, and the position the reminder of the horsemen on each side on the 2 flanks of the forces, disturbing the enemies while they themselves were protected by the Flaxenics. And as the sun shined on the golden and bronze shield, the hills glistened from them and lit up like flaming fire. While one sector of the king's forces was stretched out on the high hills, and some were on the plains, and they marched on steadfastly in good order. Everyone trembled when they heard the sounds of the soldiers as they marched along, and clinging of their weapons. For the army was massive and very strong, but Judas drew near with his army in battle formations, and 600 of the king's men fell. And then Eleazar called Evron and saw one of the elephants covered with royal armor, and it was taller than the rest, and he reasoned the king was riding it, and so laid down his life to rescue his people and to make an everlasting name for himself. He ran boldly into the center of the Flalalaks, killing the soldier in the right and the left, and they got out of his way both flanks. And then he crawled under the elephant, struck it from beneath, and killed it. It fell to the ground on top of him, and he died there. When the Israelites saw the royal might and the fierce attack of the troops, they turned away from them in the flight. But the soldiers of the king's army went up to Jerusalem to attack them, and the king set up camp in Judea on Mount Zion. He reached a peace accord with the men of Beth-zur, who evacuated the city because they had no food there to withstand the siege. And it was a sabbatical year in the land, and so the king captured Beth-zur and set guard and there secure it. And he then set a camp opposite of the sanctuary for several days, and built a siege tower engine of war, which threw the fire and stones, marching in the fire of arrows and catapults. And the defenders also made engines of war to march there. And so they battled several days, but with no food stored up, because it was the 7th year, and the men who survived in Judea against the Gentiles had eaten the remaining provisions. Few men remained in the sanctuary, for hunger had taken over them, and they scattered each to his own place. Now Lysis got word that Philip, whom Antiochus the king had chosen while still alive to raise Antiochus his son to rule, and had returned from Persia and Media with the armies that had gone there with the king. And then he was trying to gain control of the kingdom. So Lysis decided to immediately to send a message to the king, the commanders, and the men saying, "We grow weaker each day. Our food supply is running out. The force we are fighting against is strong. Governing the kingdoms put pressure on us